All right, and so to finish off the volumetric scalar field lecture, we're looking at the question of showing glyphs. We're going to see more data on glyphs when we look at the multivariate display lecture, because glyphs can support showing a lot of information in the same size. But you can basically adjust the size, the color, or the shape of little elements that float around in space, and those distortions can give you an idea of what's going on in the data set. And so we're going to need a couple of examples here. One is color and size changing glyphs. And so this is looking at a simulation of the kind of density around hydrogen, where they've put a point on these glyphs at each of the simulation nodes, and the kind of size of the particle is the radius of repulsion to the desired, particles colored by the radius, the repulsion radius, the desired repulsion radius. And so basically this is saying, where is there a problem, right? And so I want to see what the kind of desired radius is. Is it different for big ones? Is it different for small ones? Where are there bugs in my code, in my mesh, so I can understand how I can fix the mesh? So it's basically showing details of the simulation itself. And so this is particles colored by the number of neighbor links, right? Which is another simulation parameter to say, okay, now I can see is the size, is the bug caused by wrong number of neighbor links? Is it caused by wrong radius ratios? What's going on in the simulation? But this has the benefit if you can see things around and past some things and other things. The density is a little bit high here, so you can only see in about one layer or so. If the density was less, you could see in further. All right. So one interesting question is, can you scale your data-driven spots into data-driven spheres? And David Feng did that, and we're going to see about that in the multivariate lecture. And the idea here is you fill space with these little glowing balls, and they float around. You can have yellow ones and red ones, different colored ones. There's actually a soft drink rating site. I didn't know. They gave this an F, right? Because not only does it taste bad, but you can't feel those little things when you eat, and that's very, very strange. I bought these at first because I thought it'd be a collector's item, because who would ever buy this? But then it was really a cool visualization thing, so I kept them around.
What are those little things?
It's called orbits. They're little, flavored globules, I guess, but they don't taste like anything. They're there to make you say, wow, that's really cool. It's like bubble tea before they had bubble tea. All right. So because there's such a variety of the things that you can do with glyphs, this is not like you can say, okay, color maps, here's the characteristics. And this is actually still a research area. And so every year at the Viz conference, we'll see a new glyph technique for showing usually tensor fields, but also other displays. So the strength is the glyph itself is a surface in space, so you can see its shape. But you can also see around it to see ones that are behind it. The weakness is you can't put them too close together, because otherwise you're not going to see the ones behind. And the spatial frequency of variation you can show can only be as kind of dense as half your glyph frequency if you're going to be showing data values changing. And then the surfaces you see are the surface of the glyphs, not the overall surface of the shape. And so it doesn't show you regions as well as, for example, pulling out surfaces does. All right, so we've looked at 2D reduction from 3D to 2D. One is by slices. The good news is the same as the 2D data display. The bad news is it's a minuscule subset of the data, and you can't show a bunch of them at once because they include each other. You can also extract along an ISO value or some other contour that's relevant to the data, extracting according to blood vessels. And then you can show interval ratio data using the 2D techniques that we showed from before. You can't get fuzzy boundaries, and they'll emphasize noise, right? So if your algorithm is sensitive to noise, you'll get all these interesting strange shapes, and still there's a problem of occlusion. Direct volume rendering completely depends on the transfer function, and we're going to talk through some of those. And then glyphs, you can see past the first, but low frequency data only, no surface normals. This is kind of trying to fill out the table of, if I was trying to come up with, answer a question, which of these techniques would I want to use? So it turns out that perceiving depth and very complicated 3D scenes is very difficult, and so you should use all the cues that you can get a hold of. Head tracking is useful. That's still something that's expensive to get, right? You have to write custom code or get an expensive tracking device. User control motion of objects, right? So you've got that now in peer review. You can rotate the viewpoint around and see what's going on. Or animation, right? So again, we want a torsion pendulum rocking or a spinning all the way around. Both of these can be looped, and both of them kind of maintain context when they change their directions. It turns out if you can do stereo, and now you can actually get a stereo TV at home, right? You can get Stereo, it's almost there. You have to get a kind of a quadro card to do stereo on NVIDIA cards. So it's a little bit more expensive, but stereo plus head tracking is especially powerful, seeing what's going on. We're going to see that when we do the lab tours later in the semester. It's something to keep in mind because sometime in the next 10 years, this is going to be, you buy an Oculus Rift and you can stick it in there, or you're going to be able to do this with your screen as the Kinect starts doing this for you, and so forth. All right, I'm going to show a couple of examples here, many views of hydrogen, and then molecular lattice defects. So this is kind of pulling together all the different views that we've seen of hydrogen with different rendering styles. We kind of went through many of these in the kind of pain lecture on which is good for answering which questions. And so again, some of them are good for other things. If you want to know if I'm going to fly through this, how likely am I to run into something else, then you want this density accumulation, right? Because that's a great answer to that question. If you want to know kind of where the highest valued thing is, then maximum intensity projection of a direct volume rendering system can be useful because it shows you directly what that is. You might not use the grayscale map to display that. Use blackbody radiation or some contours. If you want to see what the symmetry is of the shape of a certain density, then this pulls that surface out directly and lets you show that. And if you want to see kind of how there's variance across that, you can slice that with a plane to show through. And this is kind of, the kind of direct volume rendering has the benefit that things that are in front will include things that are behind, has the deficit that it's not really doing shading the way we think it is, and so we're going to get a misperception of the shape. And so it's seldom that this will be kind of one that I'll choose among all the ones, but it does have the benefit that it shows you every voxel can contribute to the image, right? So there's something can't completely hide. All right, so this is looking at different viewpoints of molecular dynamic simulations to understand what's going on with these defects. And so basically we've got a regular lattice, and they've introduced a defect into the lattice, and then saying how can we understand what's going on here besides the ball and stick model. So if you look at a slice through here, showing density to a color map, you can see that there's symmetry around here and there's something going on here, but you can't tell how far down it goes into the lattice. Here is kind of a volume rendering, showing you contours where there's changes, and this shows you that there is a couple of things going on in depth, but doesn't show you the depth of any of them, right? And so this is showing you the complexity of the defect better than the slice view, but doesn't give you as clear view of which layer has the defect in it. Here's another example when the slice passes through the defect over here, and again you can see more complexity of the defect, but don't get exactly the idea of where the thing goes, but you get a more quantitative estimate of kind of how much change there is in density in this map. If you want to care more about shape, then this is probably something you want to do. All right, and this was a lecture that drew on things from all over the place.